At breakfast, my wife threw coffee on me when I refused to pay for her trip with another man. Have you ever had your life turned upside down in the blink of an eye? One morning, I woke up to my wife throwing hot coffee in my face, accusing me of things I never did, and trying to destroy my life. This story isn't just about betrayal, it's about revenge, strategy, and the ultimate comeback. Stick around, because you won't believe what happens next. Will I fight back or lose it all? Let's dive into this shocking tale, and trust me, you'll want to know how it ends. I sat there, the early morning light cutting through the blinds and casting long shadows across the kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee and toasted bread filled the air, but it didn't comfort me. Nothing felt warm in that moment, not the air, not the space, not even the cup of coffee sitting in front of me. Something was off, and I could feel it in my bones. The tension in the room was thick, like it was pressing down on my chest, making it harder to breathe. I tried to shake it off, tried to push away the growing unease, but it clung to me like the heat of the coffee cup I was holding. Sienna sat across from me, her arms folded tightly, her eyes narrowed in a way that made my stomach twist. I knew that look. It wasn't just annoyance, it was something darker, something colder. She was mad, and I could tell she was ready to explode. Her perfect hair, her polished nails, her makeup, all of it screamed control, the illusion of calm. But under the surface, she was a ticking time bomb, and I had a feeling I was about to set it off. "Connor," she said, her voice cold, clipped. "I'm not going to say this again. Jackson needs help, and you standing here, pretending like we can't afford it, is absolutely selfish." Her words hit me like a punch in the gut, but I wasn't going to show it. I had heard this all before, the guilt trips, the manipulation. It was like a broken record, playing over and over again. She always had a way of twisting things, making me feel like I was the one who was wrong. But this time, I wasn't going to let her get to me. I took a deep breath, willing myself to stay calm, even though every nerve in my body was telling me to react. "We've talked about this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This isn't about being selfish, Sienna. This is about boundaries. Jackson's problems aren't ours to fix anymore. He's been leaning on us for far too long." Her jaw tightened, her eyes flashing with anger. "He's my brother," she shot back, her voice rising. "Family helps family, that's what we vowed when we got married." I fought the urge to roll my eyes. She was pulling the same old card, the family card, and it was getting old. "Family also learns to stand on their own," I countered, my voice firmer now. "We've bailed him out of too many situations, Sienna. His gambling debts, his failed businesses, the rent he never paid back. Every time, it's the same damn thing. And every time, we get sucked into his mess." Her face turned red, her lips tightening into a thin line. "You don't get it," she hissed, barely keeping herself together. "You don't have siblings. You don't understand what it's like to always be there for someone, no matter what." Her words stung, but I didn't let them show. I was used to this, her playing the victim, twisting everything to make me the bad guy. But I wasn't going to back down this time. "You're right," I said slowly, my voice even. "I don't have siblings. But I do understand responsibility. And right now, my responsibility is to us. To our future. I can't keep throwing money at Jackson's problems, when it's clear he doesn't want to change." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could see the fury building behind her eyes, her hands gripping the edge of the table as if holding herself back. I knew this was it. I knew she was about to explode. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Without a word, she reached for her coffee cup and, in one swift motion, hurled it at me. Time seemed to slow. I barely had a second to react before the hot liquid slammed into my face, the scalding heat burning through my skin and soaking my shirt. I gasped, stunned, the pain almost unbearable. But it wasn't just the burn that hit me. It was the realization, the cold truth that hit me harder than the coffee itself. She had done it on purpose. She hadn't just lost control, she'd planned it. And I was the target. I sat there, shocked, the coffee dripping down my chin, soaking my shirt. The burn on my face was nothing compared to the shock of what had just happened. She stood there, frozen. Her face a mix of rage and something else, something that almost looked like regret. But it was fleeting, gone in an instant. "What the hell, Sienna?" I said, my voice low, dangerous. She straightened her shoulders, trying to regain her composure. "You pushed me, Connor," she said, her voice defensive now, though I could hear the tremor underneath. "I didn't mean, no," I cut her off, standing up slowly. "You meant it. You were angry, and you meant every bit of this." I gestured to my soaked shirt, to the redness already spreading on my skin. "This isn't just about Jackson. This is about control. You think you can manipulate me into doing whatever you want, no matter how it affects us." Her eyes hardened, her face showing no sign of guilt. "You're being dramatic," she scoffed, dismissing me with a wave of her hand. "It's just coffee. You're acting like I threw something at me?" I interrupted, my voice sharp now, anger bubbling up inside me. "Because that's exactly what you did, Sienna. And don't you dare minimize it." For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, not guilt, not remorse, but something close to defiance. "If you had just agreed to help Jackson, none of this would have happened. This is on you, Connor." The first stared at her, my mind racing. Was this who she had always been? Had I ignored the signs? Had I let her manipulate me for so long that I couldn't see it? Or had she changed so gradually that I didn't notice until now? "I think we're done here," I said flatly, my voice calm, though inside, my heart was racing. I needed to get out. I needed air. Without waiting for her to respond, I turned and walked out of the kitchen, out of the house. The sunlight that had once seemed welcoming now felt like a cruel reminder of everything that had just gone wrong. My car keys felt heavy in my hand, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I slid into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel tightly, as if it was the only thing keeping me grounded. As I pulled out of the driveway, one thought echoed in my mind. This isn't just about breakfast. This is about everything. I needed to get away. I could feel the heat still stinging my skin, but that pain was nothing compared to the burning fury churning in my chest. As I drove, I could hardly focus on the road. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached. But it wasn't just the physical tension, it was everything else. My thoughts were a mess, swirling together, replaying the scene in the kitchen over and over again. The moment she threw that coffee at me, the moment I realized she wasn't just mad, she was trying to destroy me. There was no going back after this. The burn on my face was just the beginning. I was done being manipulated. Done being her puppet. I didn't even know where I was driving. It didn't matter. I just needed to put miles between me and that house, between me and her. The sound of my tires on the pavement was the only thing that kept me grounded, but even that felt distant. I wasn't even sure where I was headed anymore. All I knew was I couldn't go back to her. Not after that. Not after everything. I pulled off the highway and into a small parking lot outside a diner. I had been here before once, a long time ago, but this time, I didn't want to go in. I needed a break. Some time to think, but I also needed someone who understood. "Nolan." I texted him, "I need to talk. Bad." A minute later, my phone buzzed. "I'm on my way." That was the thing about Nolan. He always showed up when you needed him. Whether you wanted him to or not, he knew how to get to the heart of things, cut through the noise, and tell you exactly what you needed to hear, even if you didn't want to hear it. I sat there in my car, feeling like a man at a crossroads. It wasn't just the fight with Sienna. No, it was everything that had led up to that moment. The lies, the manipulation, the endless excuses. Every time I stood up for myself, every time I tried to set a boundary, she found a way to turn it back on me. She made me feel like the bad guy, like I was the one causing all the problems. But now, for the first time, I was seeing the truth. And it wasn't pretty. When Nolan pulled up, he didn't say much. Just nodded and got in. I didn't need him to say anything yet. I could tell by the way he looked at me he knew. He always knew when something was off. "What happened, man?" he asked, his voice calm but sharp. He had that way of cutting through the noise. No small talk. No pleasantries. Just straight to the point. I let out a long breath, rubbing my face as I looked out at the passing cars. "She threw coffee at me," I said, the words sounding almost unbelievable. She did it on purpose. She's not just mad, Nolan. She's out of control." He didn't flinch. Didn't offer some half-assed sympathy. Just leaned back in his seat and let the silence hang between us for a second. "Why'd she do it?" "Because I won't help her brother anymore," I said, almost laughing at how ridiculous it sounded. Jackson's been draining us dry for years, man. He gambles, he's got this failed business, and every time he fucks up, he comes running to us. I've had enough of it. I told her no more. We're not his personal ATM. Nolan's eyes hardened. Sounds like she didn't like that. Yeah, you could say that. I let the anger build up, pushing the words out. She tried to turn it around on me, you know? She says I'm being selfish, that I don't understand family. But the truth is, she's the selfish one. She's the one who can't see that I'm drowning in this. I've been bailing her out, bailing him out, for too long, and I'm done. You've got to stand your ground, man. This is bigger than Jackson. This is about her trying to control you. Exactly. I snapped, the realization hitting me harder now. This isn't about Jackson, it's about her. It's about everything. She's been controlling me for years, Nolan, and I never saw it. Every fight, every argument, every time she guilt-tripped me, I fell for it. I always gave in. But not anymore. I won't let her do this to me. Nolan was quiet for a minute, processing it all. He knew Sienna better than most, and he'd always warned me about her. He'd seen the signs before I did. And now, here I was, realizing that every argument, every struggle had just been a way for her to tighten the noose around me. You need to get out of there, Nolan said, his voice low but firm. For good. I didn't say anything at first. I wasn't sure what to say. Leaving wasn't that simple, was it? But the truth was, Nolan was right. I couldn't go back. Not after what had just happened. Not after how far she'd gone. I'm going to see a lawyer, I said finally, the words coming out like a decision. I've been putting off for too long. I need to protect myself. I can't let her destroy me. Not again. That's the right move, Nolan agreed. But you need to be smart about this. She's not going to just let you walk away. She'll make it ugly. She'll make you look like the villain. I know, I said, my voice tight. But it's time to stop playing her game. Nolan leaned forward, his eyes focused. If she tries to make you look bad, you need to be ready. You've got to document everything. Everything. Don't leave anything to chance. She'll twist the truth if she can. I nodded, the weight of it all starting to settle in. This wasn't just about a fight. It was about surviving. About keeping my sanity. About keeping my life intact. I'll get my stuff, I said, determination creeping into my voice. And then I'm done. Good, Nolan said, his expression hardening. We'll do this together. You're not alone in this. We sat in silence for a while after that, the weight of everything pressing down on me. My mind was a million miles away, already thinking about the next steps. But there was something else there too, something heavier. I had been living in a lie for so long, and now that I was seeing it for what it was suffocating. Nolan was right. This wasn't just about leaving a toxic marriage. It was about reclaiming my life. I wasn't going to let Sienna take everything from me. When I finally got out of the car, I felt a strange sense of relief, but it wasn't the kind of relief that came with running away from something. It was the kind of relief that comes with taking control, with knowing that the next step I was taking was mine and mine alone. I wasn't going back, not to her, not to that house, not to that life. As I walked into the lawyer's office later that day, my hands were shaking, but my resolve was stronger than it had ever been. I was ready to fight. Ready to take back everything she had tried to take from me. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. You probably think you know what's coming, but I can assure you this story has more twists than you'd ever expect. What will happen when I finally stand up for myself? Will my wife back off, or will she come after me harder? Drop a comment 1 if you think I fight back and win, comment 2 if you think she gets the last laugh. You'll want to keep watching because what happens next will blow your mind. The meeting with the lawyer, Thomas Mercer, was set up for the following afternoon. I barely slept that night. My mind was racing, constantly replaying everything that had happened, everything I was about to face. The truth was, I didn't know what to expect. All I knew was that I had to take control of this situation before Sienna turned everything on me. I couldn't let her twist this into something I couldn't escape from. I arrived at Mercer's office with a mixture of dread and relief. I didn't know what would come next, but at least I was doing something. The door opened with a soft click as I walked in. Mercer stood up, a man in his mid-40s, looking every bit the part of the experienced lawyer. He had a sharp, professional air about him, But there was something else there too, an understanding. Almost like he had seen it all before. He gestured for me to sit down across from him. "Connor," he began, sitting down and flipping open a folder. "I've heard a lot of these stories before, but every one of them is different. Let's go over everything." I nodded, trying to steady myself. But the words came out shakier than I expected. "She's making this impossible. The coffee that wasn't the first time. She's been controlling me for years, and I didn't see it. She's gaslighted me, guilt-tripped me, manipulated me into doing things I never wanted to do. And now she's gone too far." Mercer didn't interrupt, just let me speak. I told him about the arguments, the constant pressure to support Jackson, the emotional manipulation that had become a part of my daily life. How every time I tried to push back, she found a way to make me feel like the bad guy. But it was more than just the money, it was the control. The need to have everything in her hands. From the finances to the decisions. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice thick with the weight of everything I'd been carrying. "But I don't know what she'll do when she finds out I'm not backing down." Mercer leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "You're right to be concerned. People like your wife, people who use control as their weapon, don't let go easily. She'll fight, and she'll make it as ugly as possible. But you've got the truth on your side, Connor. We just need to make sure you're prepared for whatever comes next." He pulled a few documents from his desk and laid them in front of me. "First, we need to secure your assets. We'll freeze the joint accounts and move any funds you don't want her accessing. If she's been draining your bank accounts, we'll need to stop that immediately." I nodded, the idea of cutting off her access to my finances both terrifying and liberating. I didn't know if I had the stomach to face her wrath, but at this point, I didn't have a choice. This was bigger than just us. It was about my future, my peace of mind. And if I didn't take this step now, I would never have the chance again. Mercer continued. "Next, we'll need to gather evidence. Any communication, texts, emails, voicemails, that shows a pattern of her behavior, her manipulation, her attempts to control you, everything." I had a gut feeling that Sienna had already been working on her version of events. She was too smart, too calculated not to have a plan in motion. She knew how to twist things to her advantage, and I could see it coming a mile away. She would try to paint me as the villain, accuse me of being unreasonable, controlling, maybe even worse. I didn't want to believe it, but a part of me knew she'd go to any length to make sure she kept control. And I was starting to realize that this wasn't just a matter of saving our marriage. It was about protecting myself from a woman who would stop at nothing to destroy me. Mercer didn't sugarcoat things. He was direct. If she makes a move, tries to make you look bad, tries to make you the one who's unstable, you need to be ready. We'll take the offensive. We'll file for separation, and we'll make sure she knows you're serious. But you need to stop second-guessing yourself, Connor. You're doing the right thing. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The last few weeks had been a blur, this constant battle in my head, the tug of war between wanting to make things work and knowing I had to walk away. I couldn't keep living in her shadow. Couldn't keep being the one who lost every time. "I'm ready," I said finally, my voice firm. It felt strange saying it out loud, but it felt right. It felt like I was finally putting myself first. Mercer nodded. "Good. You need to get your personal stuff out of the house. I recommend you do that as soon as possible, before she realizes what's happening. Don't engage in any arguments with her. If she gets physical or tries to provoke you, call the police. Document everything." The thought of going back to that house sent a chill down my spine. I could already imagine her, standing in the doorway, waiting for me to back down. Waiting for me to come crawling back. But I couldn't. Not anymore. I wasn't going to let her win. I stood up, shaking Mercer's hand firmly. "Thanks for everything. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm not going back." He smiled, a sharp look of understanding in his eyes. "You're stronger than you think. Just remember, you're not alone in this. We'll take it one step at a time." I left his office, the weight of everything still pressing down on me. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a small flicker of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. In fact, I had a feeling it would be far from it. But I was done running. I was done hiding. I was going to fight, and I was going to win. The drive back home was a blur. I didn't know what I was expecting when I got there, but the pit in my stomach only grew heavier with every mile I drove. My house loomed in front of me as I pulled into the driveway. The same house where we built a life together. A life that felt like a lie now. I hadn't even stepped inside yet, but the air felt thick, charged. The tension in my chest was suffocating. The world outside seemed so calm. The birds chirping, the wind rustling through the trees. But none of that could ease the anxiety I felt as I parked and sat there for a moment. I had to get my things. I had to take back control, even if it meant facing her. I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let her win. But part of me still felt like I was stepping into a trap. I had no idea what kind of reaction she'd have when she saw me, or what kind of game she'd try to play. All I knew was that I couldn't keep running away. I had to face this head on. I grabbed my keys and stepped out of the car, walking up to the front door with my heart pounding in my chest. My mind raced through every possible scenario. What if she was waiting for me? What if she tried to manipulate me again, like she always did? My hand shook slightly as I reached for the doorknob. But when I stepped inside, everything felt different. The house was quiet, too quiet. It wasn't the familiar chaos of arguments or strained silences. It was still, as though something was waiting to happen. The faint scent of her perfume still lingered in the air, but the space felt cold. Empty. I walked through the hallway, my footsteps echoing, and then I saw her. Sienna was standing in the kitchen, her arms crossed, her eyes studying me carefully. For a second, I thought I saw a flash of something softer in her gaze, but then it disappeared, replaced by the cold, calculating look I knew all too well. "So, you're back," she said. Her voice clipped. "I figured you'd come crawling back eventually." I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, taking her in. Her hair was perfect, as usual. The tight grip on her arms, the defensive posture, it was all the same, like she was waiting for a fight. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. "I'm not here to argue," I said, my voice steady despite the nerves crawling up my spine. "I'm here to take my things and leave. That's it." Her eyes narrowed, the hint of a smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. "Oh, so that's it? You're just going to walk out and pretend like everything's fine?" "No," I said, my voice firm, louder this time. "I'm not pretending anything. I'm taking what's mine and leaving. This isn't working, Sienna. You know it, and I know it." Her expression faltered for a second, but she quickly recovered, her eyes flashing with something dangerous. "You're really going to do this, aren't you?" she asked, stepping closer, her voice low, almost a whisper. "You're going to leave me like this?" I didn't flinch. "I'm not leaving you, Sienna. I'm leaving this. I'm leaving the lies, the manipulation, the control. I can't do it anymore." For a moment, she just stared at me, her jaw tightening. Then she turned away, as if trying to regain her composure. "You think you can just walk away from everything we built?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. "You think it's that simple?" I shook my head. "No, I don't think it's simple. But it's what I need to do. For me." She stood there, looking at me with a mixture of anger and something I couldn't quite read. Regret, maybe? But it was gone as quickly as it came. "You think you're the only one who's suffering?" she spat. "You think I haven't been trying? That I haven't been working, holding everything together while you just sit there and pretend like nothing's wrong?" The words hit me harder than I expected, but I didn't react. I couldn't. I couldn't let her pull me back into her game. "I've tried, Sienna. I've tried to make it work. But you've been using me, manipulating me, and I'm done. This isn't about Jackson, or money, or whatever excuse you're going to use. This is about us, and I'm done being part of whatever this is." Her eyes darkened, and she took a step toward me. "You think it's that easy? That you can just walk away and everything will magically get better? You're wrong. You're going to regret this." I felt the blood rush to my ears as my pulse quickened. She was trying to guilt me again, to make me feel like I was the one in the wrong. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I was done with her twisting the truth. Done with her making me feel like I wasn't allowed to have a say in my own life. "I'm not going to regret this," I said, my voice low, steady, but with a fire behind it. "I've spent too many years doing exactly what you wanted, giving up everything for you. And I'm not doing it anymore." The silence between us was heavy. It felt like an eternity. She stood there, staring at me, her fists clenched at her sides. The air in the room was thick, like something was about to break. And then, just as suddenly, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving me standing there, staring after her. I wasn't sure what had just happened, but one thing was clear: this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But I wasn't backing down. Not anymore. I was finally standing up for myself. And whatever came next, I was ready for it. The days following my conversation with the lawyer were a blur. I spent my time getting things in order, freezing joint accounts, moving money, and preparing for the inevitable storm that was coming. But even with all the planning, a knot tightened in my stomach every time I thought about what I was about to do. Leaving was one thing, but the fallout? That was something else entirely. The night before I was set to go back to the house, I could hardly sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind raced, replaying every argument, every fight with Sienna. I knew what she was capable of. I knew she wouldn't go down without a fight. But what scared me more than anything was the idea of her turning everyone against me. She was good at that. She had always been able to make me look like the villain in our story. It wasn't just about us anymore, it was about her trying to maintain control, trying to destroy me before I could destroy the life she'd built. I knew I had to move fast. If I was going to take my things and leave, I couldn't give her the chance to manipulate me again. I couldn't risk getting pulled back into her web of lies and control. The longer I stayed, the harder it would be to walk away. So, I made my decision. I was going to go in, get my stuff, and leave. No hesitation. No turning back. When I arrived at the house the next day, my heart was pounding in my chest. The familiar driveway, the front door, it all felt like a trap. I couldn't ignore the sense of dread building in the pit of my stomach. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. This was it. There was no going back now. The door creaked open when I turned the handle, the sound far louder than I expected. I walked into the hallway, the house silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. Everything looked the same, too familiar, too still. My footsteps echoed in the hallway as I moved toward the living room, and then I saw her. Sienna was standing there, waiting, her back turned to me. She was looking out the window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "You finally decided to show up," she said. Without turning around, her voice calm, almost too calm. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. There was something about the way she said it, something in her tone that sent a chill down my spine. It was the calm before the storm, and I could feel it. I wasn't sure what game she was playing, but I wasn't about to fall for it. "I'm just here to grab my things," I said, my voice steady despite the tension rising in my chest. "That's it. I don't want any more arguments. I just need to get what's mine and go." She turned to face me then, her eyes locking onto mine with a cold, calculating look. "You think it's that simple, don't you?" she asked, her voice dropping an octave. "You think you can just walk away and leave everything behind?" I took a step forward, trying to stay calm, trying to stay in control. "I'm not leaving everything behind. I'm just walking away from this. From you. From the lies. From the manipulation. I'm done with it. I'm done with you." Her face twisted, the anger flaring in her eyes. "You're done with me? You think you're the only one who's been carrying this marriage? You think I haven't tried? I've tried, Connor. I've been trying for years to make this work, and you just keep pushing me away." I shook my head. "You're not the victim here, Sienna. I've been the one trying to make it work. I've been the one giving up everything for this family, for you. But every time I set a boundary, every time I stand up for myself, you find a way to make me feel like the bad guy. You guilt trip me, you manipulate me, and you never let me breathe." Her eyes flickered for a moment, like I had hit a nerve, but then the wall went back up. "You think you can just walk away and leave me with nothing? You think you can leave me after everything we've been through?" "I'm not leaving you with nothing," I said, my voice low, my patience starting to wear thin. "You've got everything you wanted. You've always had everything. You just never wanted me to have anything." The silence that followed was heavy, oppressive. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at each other. I could see the tears threatening to spill from her eyes, but there was something else there, too. Something colder. Something more dangerous. "I'm not going to let you ruin my life, Connor," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "You think you can just walk out, but I'm not going to let you get away with it." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I'm not ruining your life. I'm taking back mine. I'm not going to let you control me anymore. I'm done with your games. I'm done being your pawn. Her hands trembled, but her eyes stayed hard. You'll regret this, she whispered, almost too softly for me to hear. I won't, I said, the words coming out with a finality I hadn't felt in years. I'm not going to regret taking control of my own life. I'm not going to regret walking away from someone who's tried to destroy me for too long. And with that, I turned, heading straight for the door. This was it. The point of no return. Sienna could threaten me, manipulate me, try to make me feel guilty all she wanted. But I was done. I was leaving, and there was no going back. The next morning was just as tense as the night before. I had barely slept, my mind too tangled with everything that had happened. After what felt like an eternity, I finally decided it was time to face whatever was waiting for me. I couldn't hide forever. I couldn't keep running away from her games. As much as I hated the idea of going back, I knew I had to finish this. I had to take control and stop living in fear of what might come next. I grabbed my keys and walked out of Nolan's apartment, heading straight for the house. Each step I took felt like it was carrying me deeper into the fire. But it was a fire I had to walk through if I ever wanted to find peace. The weight of my decisions felt heavier than ever as I drove down the familiar streets. But I was resolute. I wasn't going to let her control the narrative anymore. I wasn't going to let her twist the truth and turn me into the bad guy again. This was my life, and I was taking it back. When I pulled into the driveway, I could already feel the familiar knot in my stomach tightening. The house, the place where I once thought I could build something real, now felt like a cage. As I got out of the car, the sunlight hitting me made everything feel even more surreal. As if the world outside was moving while I was stuck in place. I walked up to the door, each step feeling heavier than the last, and when I knocked, I felt that familiar tension in the pit of my stomach. I knew she was inside, waiting for me, probably ready to turn this into another battle of wills. She opened the door before I even had time to think, her expression unreadable. You came back, she said flatly, but her eyes gave it away. There was something beneath the surface, a simmering anger I couldn't ignore. I'm here for my stuff, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the rising tension between us. I wasn't going to let her draw me in. I wasn't going to get caught in another one of her mind games. She stared at me for a moment, as if assessing whether or not she should let me in. Finally, she stepped aside, her expression hardening. You think it's that simple? She asked, her voice cold. You think you can just come in, take your things, and walk away like nothing happened? I'm not here to argue, I said, my voice low, but resolute. I'm here to take what's mine. That's it. She crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe, as if preparing for a fight. You're not going anywhere until we talk, she said, her tone icy. You don't get to just leave and pretend like everything's fine. You think I'm just going to let you walk away after everything we've been through? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. I wasn't going to let her control this conversation. I wasn't going to let her twist things again, make me feel guilty for doing what I had to do. This isn't about us anymore, I said firmly. It's about me taking control of my own life. I can't keep doing this with you, Sienna. I can't keep letting you dictate everything. I'm done being your punching bag, done letting you use me for whatever you want. She let out a bitter laugh, but there was no humor in it. You think I'm the problem here? You think you've been the victim all this time? She took a step closer to me, her voice rising. You've been running from this for years. Connor. You've been hiding behind your excuses, behind your boundaries while I've been the one holding this marriage together. You think this is easy for me? You think I've enjoyed this? I clenched my fists, my heart racing, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'm not saying it's been easy. But I've been living in your shadow for too long, Sienna. And I can't do it anymore. I can't keep pretending like everything's fine when it's not. This isn't a marriage, it's a prison. And I'm done being locked inside it. Her face twisted in anger, her eyes flashing with something dangerous. You think you can just walk away and that's it? You think you're going to leave and everything's going to be fine? No, I said, my voice steady, despite the growing storm inside me. But I'm not going to stay and let you keep doing this. You've lied to me, you've manipulated me, and you've used me for far too long. And I'm not going to let you do it anymore. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at me. her chest rising and falling with the anger in her. Then, without warning, she reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through the screen. I knew what she was doing. I could feel it. She was going to call Jackson. She was going to try to drag him into this. "You can't just walk away," she said, her voice shaky now, but still tinged with that dangerous edge. "You think you can just leave and never have to deal with the consequences?" I took a step toward her, my eyes locked onto hers. "I'm already dealing with the consequences," I said, my voice colder now, "and I'll deal with whatever else comes. But I'm not backing down." Her eyes narrowed as she gripped the phone tighter, her whole demeanor shifting. She wasn't going to let this go easily. But neither was I. This was it. The final showdown. And I wasn't going to lose. I didn't expect things to go down like this. I had planned it all out: get my stuff, leave, and never look back. Simple, right? But as I stood there in the doorway, with Sienna staring me down, I realized that nothing was ever going to be that easy with her. She was a force. A storm that I had let control me for too long. And now I was the one trying to escape it. She wasn't backing down. She never did. Every time I tried to assert myself, to stand up for what I wanted, she found a way to twist the situation, to make it seem like I was the problem. This time, I wasn't going to let her have the last word. I had already made up my mind. I had already made the decision. I wasn't going to give in. But damn, it wasn't easy. The tension in the air was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I could see the anger in her eyes, the defiance in her posture. She wasn't going to let me walk away without a fight. "You think you're just going to leave and everything's going to be fine?" Sienna said, her voice sharp, her arms crossed over her chest. She took a step toward me, her eyes never leaving mine. "You can't just walk out on me, Connor. You think I'll let you ruin everything we've built?" "I'm not ruining anything, Sienna," I said, my voice low but firm. "You've been the one holding everything together. But at what cost? At the cost of me? At the cost of my sanity? I can't do this anymore. I'm not playing your game. I'm done." Her face twisted with anger, but there was something else there, too. A hint of fear, maybe? She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to being the one who didn't have control. And I knew she wasn't going to let me go without a fight. "You think you're the only one who's suffered?" She shot back, her voice trembling now, though she was trying to hide it. "You think you're the only one who's had to deal with all of this? You've shut me out, Connor. You've made me feel like I'm nothing. And now you think you can just walk away?" I shook my head, trying to keep my cool. "I've never shut you out, Sienna. You shut me out. You controlled everything. You made the decisions, you set the rules, and I had to follow. I was just trying to keep the peace, trying to keep everything from falling apart. But it's not working anymore. I can't keep pretending like this is okay." She stepped closer, her voice now a harsh whisper. "You don't get it, do you? I've sacrificed everything for this. For you. For us. And you're just going to throw it all away?" I could feel the anger rising in my chest, the frustration, the years of pent-up emotion. It was like I had been living in a cage, and now I was finally free. I wasn't going to let her trap me again. "I didn't ask you to sacrifice everything, Sienna," I said, my voice shaking with emotion now. "I didn't ask for this. You did. You built this life, and I was just along for the ride. But I'm done. I'm done being your puppet, done being the one you control. I'm walking away." Her face contorted with rage. "You think you can just leave me like this? You think I'm going to let you walk away without consequences?" And that was when I realized it. I wasn't just fighting for my freedom. I was fighting for my future. I was fighting for my sanity. She was going to fight dirty. She always did. She wasn't going to let me walk away without trying to destroy me. And I was ready for that. "I don't care what consequences you throw at me," I said, standing tall now. "I'm done. And no matter what you do, no matter how you try to spin this, I'm not coming back." She was seething now, her breath coming in shallow bursts. I could see the desperation in her eyes, the fear of losing control. She didn't want me to leave, not because she loved me, but because she needed me. She needed me to be the one who caved, who gave in to her manipulations. But not this time. She took another step toward me, her voice shaking with fury. "You don't get to make this decision. I do. You can't just walk away from me, Connor. You can't just leave everything behind like it's nothing. I wasn't listening to her anymore. I was already walking toward the door, my mind set, my heart pounding. I couldn't afford to look back. I couldn't afford to let her change my mind again. But just as I reached for the door handle, I heard her voice one last time. "You'll regret this, Connor," she whispered, her voice almost pleading now. "You'll regret walking away from me, I promise you." But I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I opened the door and stepped out into the world beyond, knowing I had made the right choice. I wasn't just leaving her behind. I was leaving the lies, the manipulation, and the control. I was walking into my future, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. As I stepped out of the house, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. My breath was shallow, my hands shaking, but I couldn't stop now. There was no turning back. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but it was quickly replaced by the realization that this wasn't over. No, it was just beginning. The door slammed shut behind me, and I didn't dare look back. I had made it out. I had gotten what I came for, but as I walked down the driveway toward my car, my mind was already racing. What would she do next? What lengths would she go to now that she knew I wasn't coming back? I climbed into my car, slamming the door shut behind me, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I could still hear her voice echoing in my head, her threats, her promises that I'd regret this, that I'd never be free of her. She was right about one thing: I was never going to be truly free of her. Not unless I made sure of it. I put the car in gear and pulled out of the driveway, my eyes focused on the road ahead, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching me, that she was waiting for the right moment to strike back, to drag me back into her world. It didn't matter how far I drove. It didn't matter how fast I went. This was far from over. I needed to think. I needed to plan. But right now, all I could think about was how everything had led up to this moment. How long had I been walking around, pretending everything was fine? How many times had I let her manipulate me, guilt-trip me, make me feel like I wasn't enough? I had given her everything. And what did I have to show for it? Nothing but pain, betrayal, and a marriage that had become a prison. I made my way to Nolan's place, the one person I knew I could count on. As soon as I parked, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. He wasn't just my best friend. He was the one person who knew me better than anyone else, and I knew he'd get it. He'd understand the hell I'd just walked out of. I rang the doorbell, and within moments, Nolan opened the door, looking every bit as tired as I felt. His eyes were sharp, assessing, but the moment he saw the look on my face, his expression softened. Without a word, he stepped aside and let me in. "Man, you good?" he asked, his voice steady but concerned. I nodded, but the words caught in my throat. "I'm done," I said, finally finding my voice. "It's over." He didn't ask any more questions, didn't push for details. He just nodded and led me to the living room, where we both sat in silence for a few minutes. I could feel the weight of the last few days pressing down on me. The exhaustion, the tension, everything I had been carrying. But even with all of that, I knew deep down I had made the right choice. "I don't even know what's going to happen next," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "She's not going to let this go. She's going to come after me. I know it." Nolan leaned back, his eyes thoughtful. "She's gonna try, man. But you've got the upper hand now. She's got nothing left to hold over you." I let out a bitter laugh. "That's the problem. She's dangerous when she's cornered. She's gonna pull every trick she knows to drag me back in." "Then don't let her," Nolan said simply. "You've already taken the hardest step. Now, you just need to keep moving forward." His words stuck with me as I sat there, trying to gather my thoughts. But no matter how hard I tried, the fear of what Sienna might do kept creeping into my mind. What if she started playing dirty? What if she tried to turn the whole world against me, the way she'd always tried to manipulate me into believing I was the problem? I could feel the anger building inside me again. The anger at myself for letting it get this far. The anger at her for everything she had done. But more than that, I could feel the desire for revenge. No, not revenge. For justice. I needed to protect myself. To make sure that this wasn't just the end of our marriage, but the end of her power over me. "I'm not going back, Nolan," I said, my voice steady now, the fire returning. "I don't care what she tries. I'm done being her victim. I'm taking control of my life, and I'm not letting her destroy me. Nolan's eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I saw the conviction in his gaze. Good. You're not alone in this, Connor. We're gonna make sure she doesn't win. I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. I wasn't alone anymore. I had made the decision to leave her behind, and I had no intention of going back. I was going to make sure that I never let her control me again. The war wasn't over yet, but I was ready for whatever came next. As I left Nolan's place later that night, the first spark of hope lit inside me. Maybe, just maybe, I was finally free. Free of her, free of the lies, free of the constant manipulation. It wouldn't be easy, and I knew the road ahead would be full of battles. But I was ready for them. Because this time, I wasn't backing down. I wasn't going to let her win. Not again. The days after I made the decision to leave felt like a whirlwind. I had thought that walking away would bring a sense of relief, but instead, it felt like I had just stepped into a storm. The tension between us had always been there, but now it was sharper, more dangerous. Sienna wasn't the type to give up easily, and I knew she'd fight back in every way she could. But I couldn't let that scare me. I had made the choice. I had taken control of my life again, and I wasn't about to let her tear it apart. The first few days were the hardest. I had packed up my things, moved into a small apartment, and started the process of severing ties. It felt like every step was a battle, and every time I looked over my shoulder, I half expected to see her there, trying to drag me back into her world. Her calls, her texts, they came relentlessly. At first, I almost felt guilty for not responding. But then, I remembered everything she had done. The lies, the manipulation, the control, and I knew I couldn't go back to that life, no matter how much she tried to make me feel like I was the one who was wrong. I spent the next few weeks in a haze. The shock of leaving her had worn off, but the weight of everything else was starting to settle in. There were moments when I felt like I was drowning in it all. The fear of what Sienna might do next. The anxiety of facing her for the last time. But there were also moments of clarity. Moments when I remembered why I had made this decision in the first place. I remembered what it felt like to have control over my own life again. I had reached out to my lawyer, Thomas Mercer, right after I left. I knew things were about to get ugly, and I needed to make sure I was ready for whatever Sienna was going to throw at me. She wasn't going to just let me go without trying to make me pay for it. I knew that. But I wasn't going to let her destroy me. Not this time. When Mercer called me in for a meeting, I was ready. I had already gathered as much evidence as I could: text messages, emails, anything that showed her true nature. But I wasn't prepared for the next bombshell he dropped. He told me that Sienna had already started spreading rumors about me. She had been telling people I was abusive, that I had been controlling her, that I was the reason our marriage had fallen apart. At first, I didn't believe it. But as Mercer showed me the text messages, the conversations with friends and family, it became clear that she had already started her campaign to turn everyone against me. My heart sank. It felt like she had just reached inside me and ripped out whatever shred of peace I had left. The idea that she was going to use lies to ruin me, to paint me as the villain in our story, it was almost too much to bear. But I couldn't let her win. Not again. I had fought too hard to take my life back, and I wasn't about to let her rewrite the story in her favor. Mercer was firm in his advice. I needed to stay calm. I needed to let her make the first move. He warned me that if I went after her too aggressively, if I let my emotions get the best of me, she could use it against me. He told me to let her dig her own grave. He told me to stay silent, to let her accusations build until we could strike back with the truth. The days that followed were filled with a strange mix of anticipation and dread. Every time my phone buzzed, I was afraid it was her. I was afraid it was another one of her manipulative texts, another attempt to pull me back into her world. But for the most part, I kept my distance. I focused on rebuilding my life, one small piece at a time. I reached out to friends I hadn't spoken to in years. I started going to the gym again. I began taking better care of myself. For the first time in a long time, I was able to breathe. But Sienna wasn't going to let me go that easily. A few weeks after I had moved out, I got a call from Mercer. This time, his tone was different. It was more urgent. Sienna had filed a police report. She was accusing me of domestic violence. At first, I thought it was a joke. But when Mercer told me the details, my stomach dropped. She had claimed that I had pushed her, shoved her against a wall, and left bruises on her arms. She said I had threatened her, that I had made her fear for her safety. The world spun around me. I couldn't believe it. I had never laid a hand on her. I had never been violent. But it didn't matter. She had made the accusations, and now it was up to me to prove my innocence. The next few days were a blur. Mercer helped me gather evidence, collect witness statements, and prepare for the inevitable police interrogation. It felt like my entire world was coming down around me. Sienna had turned the tables. She had found a way to make me the villain. She was going to make sure that no matter what happened, she came out on top. But I wasn't going to let her. I couldn't. I had already come so far. I had already taken control of my life, and I wasn't about to let her tear it all down with lies. The day of the interrogation arrived. My hands were shaking as I sat in the back of Mercer's office, waiting for the call. I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know if the police would believe her. I didn't know if they would believe me. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going down without a fight. When Mercer and I walked into the police station, the weight of everything hit me like a punch to the gut. This was it. The moment where everything I had fought for, everything I had worked to rebuild, was on the line. I had to stay calm. I had to stay focused. I couldn't let Sienna win. Not now. The detective who questioned me was a professional. He asked the standard questions, kept things calm, kept things under control, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. He didn't believe her. I could tell. He wanted to hear the truth. He wanted to hear my side of the story. I explained everything: how our marriage had been toxic, how Sienna had manipulated me, how she had used me to get what she wanted. I told him the truth, the whole truth. And I knew it was working. Because with every word I spoke, I could see the detective's eyes soften. I wasn't the villain in this story. She was. In the end, the truth came out. Sienna's lies fell apart, and her accusations were shown for what they were: nothing but an attempt to control me, to punish me for walking away. The police dropped the charges. I was cleared. And I could finally breathe. The moment I walked out of that police station, it felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. I had fought back. I had faced her head on, and I had won. But more than that, I had taken my life back. I was no longer trapped in her lies, no longer bound by her control. I got into my car, feeling lighter than I had in years. I wasn't just free from her. I was free from everything she had done to me. I was free to build my life again, to find peace, to find happiness. It wasn't the end of the battle, but it was the beginning of my new life. And for the first time, I was ready for whatever came next. Because now, I knew I could handle anything. Sienna had tried to destroy me, but in the end, she had only made me stronger. And that was the sweetest victory of all. So, here's the million-dollar question: did I walk away victorious? Or did she tear me apart with her lies? You're about to find out. The final showdown is here, and I'm not holding back. You've seen the story unfold, but trust me, you won't believe how it ends. Comment below and let me know what would you do if you were in my shoes. And don't forget to hit like if you want to see more unbelievable stories like this. I learned the hard way that no one should ever allow themselves to be manipulated or controlled. No matter how much someone tries to guilt you, twist the truth, or make you feel responsible for their actions, your peace of mind and mental health should always come first. If you're in a toxic relationship, whether it's romantic, family, or even work-related, don't let fear hold you back. Stand up for yourself, seek help when needed, and don't be afraid to walk away from things that drain you. Your life is yours to live, not to be dictated by others.